In this brief presentation, I'm going to try to outline some possible significances of dream animals in Old Norse sagas, focusing on wild animals. So, a first remark would be the fact that Old Norse literature extensively portrays a fluid and contested boundary between humans and animals, and that would demonstrate a deep interconnectedness. There is definitely a emotionally significant relationship between humans and animals in the sagas, with humans developing close bonds, especially with certain domestic animals, particularly horses and dogs. These animals are often described as companions or even by the name of fosterlings, fostli. This would bring them into the realm of family relations and would blur the line between human and animal, so their loyalty and intelligence would further challenge the distinction between humans and non-humans. Animals in dreams can be described as fetches most of the times, the so-called Fylgjur, but also as intentions, the hugir, representing rather thoughts than actual human characters. The dream animals are closely linked to their human counterparts, sharing their fate and reflecting their defining characteristics, and this would suggest a profound psychological connection and metaphorical link. The death of an animal Fylgja in a dream usually foretells the death of the person it follows, so the meaning of the term would be the follower, but generally speaking, these animals actually come before the person in these scenes in the sagas. Old Norse literature features numerous instances of physical and psychological transformations between humans and animals as well, and for that we have the concept of hamr, meaning shape or form, quite literally skin, and that would be central to the idea of shape-shifting, which is very common in these stories, and that would allow individuals to assume animal forms. The process could be sometimes linked to the Deleuzian concept of devenir animal, so becoming the animal, which would destabilize the dichotomy between animal and human, between wild, domestic, and nature and culture. And examples would include individuals transforming into bears, wolves, or birds. While less common, there are also instances of communication between humans and animals, particularly in the comprehension of human speech by a bear, but more frequently humans understanding the language of birds, with birds being depicted as preeminent communicators of wisdom. The connections between humans and animals in the sagas are paralleled by relationships between animals and the gods in Norse mythology, mythological figures such as Odin and Loki exhibiting animal features and undergoing transformations, further blurring the boundaries between the divine and the animal realm. Despite this fluidity, the boundary between human and animal is also contested and maintained in Norse literature. For example, we have prohibitions against bestiality and the consumption of certain animals as meat, particularly horse meat in post-conversion Scandinavia. And such an idea would serve to demarcate the human and animal sphere. Breaking the taboo could lead to characters being depicted as monstrous. So we definitely have a Christian influence here, with the conversion to Christianity leading to a more clearly delineated boundary between nature and culture. The portrayal of these fluid and contested boundaries reflects a worldview where animals and humans were deeply interconnected, especially in the pre-Christian period, which is often the setting for the sagas. Medieval Icelandic authors drew upon experiential observations of animals, but also conventional symbolic associations from the Germanic tradition and continental Europe in their literary representations. So they engaged with the imaginative, the supernatural, and the animal, which reflects some sort of, let's say, environmental ideology in this sort of literature, which leads me to a couple of theoretical remarks on how to interpret animals in these sources. There is a new trend, which is eco-criticism, animal-centered thought, which would examine the cultural construction of reality reflected in supernatural animal qualities and human-animal relations. And this would highlight the psychological link to animals and the natural environment. This contemporary eco-criticism has broadened to include animals as part of the physical environment, and it acknowledges the interconnectedness between nature and culture. some of the authors argue that the supposedly distinct realms of culture and nature are actually natural cultural, and this would be a shift that recognizes the importance of studying the relationship between humans and the non-human, and it would allow us to dialogue with the past and understand how people of different times, in our case medieval Scandinavia, thought and wrote about animals and their environment in ways that are relatively different from modern ideas. Another potential concept could be useful in this context would be devenir animal, becoming animal, Deleuze and Guattari. This concept is useful to understand human-animal transformations in Old Norse literature because it is a concept that emphasizes movement and also the deconstruction of multiple dichotomies, such as animal, human, wild, domestic, and nature culture during these transformations. So a process involving a continuum which implies forms and significations that dissolve, leading to a deterritorialization of these categories of humans and animals or non-humans. Then we can also draw on Claude Lévi-Strauss, the anthropology on totemism. This would help explain the symbolic associations given to different animal species. Animals in these frameworks are seen as good to think, embodying ideas and cultural meanings based on their position in nature. The Fylgjur motif, where animals are linked to individuals with shared characteristics and destinies, can be understood within a hypothetically totemic pre-Christian belief system. And last but not least, we also have a concept used by Philippe Descola, the one regarding animism, a perspective that considers the interconnectedness and potential shared interiority between humans and animals. In this worldview, humans view animals as having a different physicality, but a similar interiority. So this could be expressed as a continuity of souls and a discontinuity of bodies. And it is possible that the oral tradition that influenced saga authors might contain traces of an animistic worldview as defined by Descola. So he insists on the personal relationships between humans and non-humans, on the idea of metamorphosis between human and animal form, as well as on communication via speech or prophetic dreams and visions. The concept of hammer would be again very relevant here. It allows for the donning or discarding of different physicalities, highlighting the body's role as an ontological differentiator. So Descola argues that metamorphosis plays an important function in animistic systems. Conversion from animal to human reveals interiority, and conversion from human to animal is an attribute of power possessed by certain individuals. And now let's look at a couple of examples of wild animals that can be found in Icelandic literatures. We have quite a lot of examples, and I also noticed that wild animals are actually more used than domestic animals. So, for instance, we have examples of bears, usually polar bears, hvítabjarnar, the dominant type of bear in dreams, and they frequently almost always represent people who are particularly strong and valiant chieftains, kings, all kinds of protagonists. For example, Old Saga, or the dreams of a polar bear encircling an island with its tail interpreted as order surrounding the land with his power. Others Fylgjur is also a polar bear aligning with his heroic life. Then another example would be the outlaw Hörður Grímkelsson in Harðar Saga Holmverja, symbolized by a polar bear again, distinguishing him from his followers who are represented as a wolf pack, which would signify his leadership and strength. Queen Ingigerðr in Hrólfs Saga Gautryggssonar dreams of a red-cheeked polar bear following a lion, which would be King Hrólfr, and preceding wolves, understanding the bear to be the fylgja of a champion accompanying the king. A dream bear of an unidentified species represents Þorstein in Þorsteins Saga Síðu Hallssonar, who's also described as a very strong chieftain. In Þorsteins Saga Víkingssonar, we have King Njörvir's 8 sons, symbolized by bears, with them being described as large and fierce. And in Sögubrota Fornkonungum, we have King Hrörekr dreaming of a bear protecting her cub from a dragon. This bear is interpreted as it representing Auður, whose son Haraldr later embodies the characteristics associated with the bear Fylgjur. The symbolic meaning of polar bears as a kingly characteristic in dreams may be extended to brown bears from mainland Scandinavia into the medieval Icelandic worldview. So most likely polar bears were used because they were also considered to be a little more exotic. Then we have wolves. They're also very common. Dream wolves never signify peace. They usually appear in packs, and they represent hostile enemies with harmful intentions, which is a very common literary motif. In Gísla saga Súrssonar, Gísli dreams of a wolf running from a farm, killing Vestein. This dream, alongside another one involving a viper, helps Gísli identify Vestein's killer. And the wolf, like the serpent, is depicted as acting without honor. A female Fylgjur announcing death in Helga Hjörvarssonar rides a wolf. And then we have þáttr in Haraldar saga, Sigurðarsonar dreaming of a terrifying troll woman riding a wolf with a corpse in its mouth, foreshadowing the king's downfall. Atli in Haraldar saga, Ísfirðings dreams of 18 wolves led by a vixen, which he recognizes as the men's minds, mannahugir. And in Haraldar saga, Og Holmverja Þorbjörg dreams of 80 fire-breathing wolves led by a polar bear. While Indrindi interprets them as the minds of the people of Holm, Þorbjörg sees them as representing the people themselves, aligning with the function of Fylgjur. And there is an episode in Þórðar saga Hreðu where Þorbjörg interprets dream wolves as the hugir of people of Holm, and while she does that, while she interprets them as representing actual people, the text also notes that these wolvish intentions are made manifest in the ensuing attack. So here you can see that the lines between these two concepts of Fylgjur and hugir are actually blurred in many cases. We do have a couple of examples of foxes. Interestingly, dream foxes. They're quite rare, though, usually associated with magic and deception. The vixen leading the wolves in Atli's dream in Haraldar saga Ísfirðings is described as exceptionally cunning and evil in appearance. Then we have in Thorstein's saga Síðu-Hallssonar, Þórhardar dreams of a polar bear being killed by a certain fox emerging from a pile of stones, and the dream associates the fox with wicked and low social status, in contrast to a noble bear, for example. And Queen Ingigerd in Halfdadar saga, Brönnufostra dreams of two arctic foxes serving a deceitful and magical king, further linking foxes to deception and magic. The dream also suggests a taxonomy where bears represent, as already stated, nobility, wolves are the savage ones, and foxes are the sneaky and magical creatures. Boars are also in appearance. Sometimes the wild boar, the göltr, they usually represent troublesome individuals. As an example for that, Hrólfs saga Gautreks. Here we have a dream of a small and hostile boar, dreamt by Queen Ingigerdr, trying to overturn everything and trying to bite. She identifies this as the Fylgja of Hrólf's troublesome brother Ketil, whose characteristics align with the dream boar's depiction. This would align with continental ideas of boars as being savage. And the last example of a wild animal would be the hart. They are also very rare appearances. They usually symbolize nobility, and their appearance could actually be influenced by the bestiary tradition, meaning the idea of Christ overcoming evil, symbolized by a hart. In Völsunga saga, Gudrun Gjúkardóttir dreams of a great hart, far larger than other animals, with gold hair. This dream foretells her love for and the death of Sigurður Fáfnisbani. The dream hart's role as a slayer of serpents in continental traditions parallels Sigurd's slaying of the dragon Fáfnir. So the hart can be considered also in this case a symbol of, or at least a parallel to, the idea of Christ overcoming the devil. So these examples would demonstrate the rich symbolism of wild animals in Old Norse dreams, often reflecting character, fate, intentions of individuals, and drawing upon local experiences and broader European traditions. There is this distinction between Fylgjur and hugir, representative, but it is also often blurred, especially in the later sagas. The appearance of the dream animals, particularly in the shape of Fylgjur, of fetches, is often associated with the pre-Christian past in the sagas. So there isn't really a way of saying that these are pagan elements, but they are at least some sort of pagan memory used in the sagas. Animal Fylgjur are the form that most dream animals take in the sagas. They appear to individuals in dreams and are indicative of a person's character and fate. They act as symbolic images that point towards someone's inner qualities and defining characteristics. They can also be thought of as metaphors, revealing much about the people they follow. And then we have the idea of the death of someone's animal Fylgja in a dream, which always implies that the person's going to die. So they foretell the future and figure an individual's fate. And as we have seen, different species of wild animals are associated with different types of human characters, reflecting medieval Scandinavian attitudes. For example, polar bears represent people who are particularly strong, and then wolves appearing in packs represent hostile enemies. They never announce peace. And then we have the foxes, portrayed as killers, but also associated with magic, and so on and so forth. While dream animals can be referred to as hugir as well, animal fylgjur represent actual human beings, while hugir in animal form represent the thoughts and intentions of people. But like I said before, this distinction is not always clear. The appearance of animal Fylgjur is a literary motif in the sagas. It is possibly rooted in pre-Christian beliefs, possibly also totemic in nature. At any rate, they do tend to appear in settings prior to Iceland's conversion to Christianity. So they act as symbolic representations of individuals' inner characteristics, their destined fates. It's important to note that the sagas, while explicitly referring to dream animals as hugir, the sagas mentioning hugir are rather from the 14th, 15th century. So the authors might not have been, well, either aware of this distinction, or they might have dropped it completely and gotten more creative in the interpretation and elaboration of dream episodes. So the distinction doesn't appear to be that important anymore. But it's also interesting to notice that we do have this idea represented of an animal just being symbolic of a thought or of a mental state, so not only of a particular person. Coming back to the theory in the introduction, so we could try to apply them in this case. Deleuze and Guattari's concept of devenir animal would emphasize movement, the deconstruction of dichotomies, and it involves participating in movement and crossing thresholds between different realms, in our case between human and non-human. So, for example, the appearance of wild animals as fylgjur in Old Norse literature would challenge the clear separation between human and animal realms. The fylgja would blur the line between human identity and animal characteristics. Wild animals inherently out of control, or at least belonging to a different realm, in this way become intimately linked with human beings, at least in the dreamscape. The actions of wild animals in dreams, such as polar bears, can be seen as expressions of intensity as well. Dream narratives often mirror characteristics and potential actions of the human counterpart. So wolves functioning as hugir, representing the evil minds of men and attacking the dreamer. This would illustrate an intense negative intention embodied in animal form. So essentially, this concept could be applied in this case as well. It challenges fixed identities. I think the most important merit of this theory would be this one, the insistence on this transformation inherent in devenir animal, echoed in the symbolic fluidity of wild animals in dreams. And the second theory would be that of animism, the concept of animism, where humans view animals as having a similar interiority, just a different physicality. This could provide another lens through which to understand wild dream animals. So it would signify a connection at the level of inner essence or qualities, the bravery of a particular animal, or the cunning of another one could reflect a perceived inner characteristic of certain human characters. And the fact that dream animals can also reveal a person's fate also implies a deep, perhaps spiritual connection between the dreamer and their animal representation. So the dream itself highlights the difference in physicality between the human dreamer and the wild animal Fylgjur. The human remains in a state of vision or of sleep, while the animal acts within the dream narrative. So the separation in physical form would underscore Descola's concept of animism. As a conclusion, more in the form of a reflection, so applying Deleuze and Guattari's devenir animal to wild animals would highlight the fluidity of these categories, of these boundaries, the movement and intensity embodied by these dream figures, and also the deconstruction of these categories. And it's also worth thinking about Descola's concept of animism, because it would emphasize the potential of a shared interiority between humans and wild animals, despite their different physical forms. And this would reflect a different ontological perspective in the medieval Old Norse Icelandic worldview, although, like I said, it's not really clear whether this was indeed a reflection of coherent pagan mentality.